All right, guys, welcome back. Previous video, we set up our script for our server menu. So if we go here, we go to the graph, and we go to the event graph. We did all of this script, and we also implemented our online subsystem. So we were able to access Steam, and we demoed that. Up next, we're going to start working on the lobby side of things. We're going to move out of the front end and into our lobby map now. And we're going to start working on our lobby player controller in this video. It's also at this point in the series where you're going to start to see a lot of the blueprints start communicating between each other. So we'll need to hop back and forth between some blueprints a little bit. I'll try to keep that to a minimum or minimize that as much as I can. So before we start working in the lobby player controller blueprint, we're going to have to create some functions in some of the other blueprints. So we're going to go inside the content browser here. We're going to go to the lobby folder. And let's open up the lobby game mode first of all. So go ahead and open that up. Mine opened off screen. Let me bring that in. And it's open in the full blueprint editor, like so. So inside of here, we're going to need to create two events that we're going to be calling inside of our lobby player controller. And we're going to create those now so that we can access them when we start scripting our lobby player controller. So I'm going to delete both of these. We don't need these for now. All we're going to do inside of here is right-click and create a custom event. This custom event is going to be called swap character. So it's going to have some inputs on it. It's going to have three, actually. First one is going to be of the player controller type. And it's going to be reference, so player controller reference. And we'll just call that player controller. The next one is going to be of the character type. And it's going to be character class. Let's go ahead and select that. And we'll say character class. And the last one is going to be a Boolean. That's fine. We're going to call this changed status. And what we're going to use this event for when we get to scripting our lobby game mode is swapping the current character with the selected character that the player has selected. We're going to use this event to handle that. Now what we do need to do, and this is the first time that I think we've done this in this series, is use a replicated function for this. So we can, similar to what we do with our variables, if we select the node here, there's some options for replication here. And what we're going to do for this is, right now it says not replicated. We're going to run this on the server. Now there's a couple different options here. There's multicast, as the tooltip here says, replicate this event from the server to everyone else. The server executes this event locally. This is only call this on the server. Run on server, so replicate this event from net owning client to the server, and then run on owning client, replicate this event from the server to the owning client. We're going to use a mixture of these two primarily. I don't think we're going to use any multicast in this series, but we're going to use these two quite a bit actually. So this first one, we want this to run on the server. So run on server, it executes on the server. Okay, that's all we're going to do. We're not actually going to script this just yet. The other thing that we're going to do is let's go ahead and create another event here just below this. We'll say custom event. This custom event will be called everyone update. So everyone update. And we're also going to set this to replicated and run on server. Now there's a couple other things too that I wanted to, or one other thing I wanted to mention. Just below the replicates option, there is a reliable versus unreliable setting. Go ahead and check that for reliable on both of these. You don't necessarily want everything to be reliable, otherwise you'll boggle down your bandwidth. But things like miscellaneous particle effects or something that's not critical, you can set that to unreliable. And most of the time it will still go through, but to guarantee things will go through, you need to set it to reliable. So this everyone update, this is going to update all of the players that are connected. So anytime a player connects to the lobby, changes their character, toggles whether or not they're ready, or the server changes some settings, this is going to get fired, and it's going to do a lot of scripting here, making sure that everybody gets the latest information. And we'll do that once we get to the lobby game mode blueprint. So let's compile and save this and close this for now. That's all we're going to do in here. So I'm going to close that out. And let's see, the other thing we need to do is inside of our lobby menu widget blueprint. So we're going to go down to the lobby folder. lobby menu widget blueprint. Go ahead and double click, open that up. And let me drag that in. We're not going to do the UI layout for this. We're just going to hop over to the graph and create some of the things that we'll need. The first, let's delete both of these. Don't need those. First is going to be a variable that we'll need. And this variable is going to be called lobby server name. And we're going to define that as text. And we're also going to make sure, let's put it in a category. We'll just call it, let's see, what do we want to call it? What is it? Let me see, just make sure, lobby info, let's say that. So put it under lobby info. And we're also going to make sure that it is replicated. And we're going to make it editable and expose this on spawn. So let's compile and save that. Okay. There's a couple other things that we'll need to do in here. A couple other variables that we'll need. Let's go ahead and create some of the other variables that we'll need. So I'm going to add another variable. This variable is going to be called map name. Actually, let me delete that real quick. Find an easier way to do this. Delete that. We'll select our lobby server name and hit Control-W to duplicate it. Now we'll call this one map name, because now it's already set for us as replicated. It's in our category, etc. We don't need to expose this on spawn, and we can leave that like that. That'll be fine. Let's go ahead and do that again. Let's do one more. So Control-W, we'll call this map time. So the display of our map name, the display of the time, those are going to be variables that can be defined by the server. The other one that we'll need, if we Control-W again, is the map image, so our thumbnail of our image. So we'll call this texture 2D. It's going to be reference. Like so. And let's compile that. Okay. Just looking at my notes, what else do we need? We need one more variable, I think, for now. Call this one, whoops, let's delete that. Select this, Control-W, we'll call this players display. So the number of connected players, so 1 out of 3 players, 2 out of 3 players, etc., is going to be a text value. So we'll make sure that that's replicated inside of our lobby info as well. So I think that's all the variables that we need for now. We do need to create a couple events, so let's create those. Inside the graph now, let's right-click and say custom event. And this event is going to be called clear player list. What clear player list is going to do is we'll have a bunch of our players connected. So imagine this is our lobby. So you have player 1, player 2, player 3. When somebody joins, we're going to wipe that list and repopulate it with everybody when we call our everyone update custom event that we created. So we're not going to create the script for this now. We're just creating the custom event so we can call it. And let's see, the other one that we need to create inside of here, custom event. And it's going to be called update player window. So, and update player window is going to need an input. Let's add an input to it. It's going to be of the player info type. And we'll just say incoming player info, like so. So we'll clear the player list, and then we'll run this update player window for every player that is connected. So this will get called, the information will get passed through, and update our player window with all the players that are connected. Now we do want this to run on the owning client. So let's go ahead and click our drop down here, run on owning client. We don't need to worry about the clear player list one. We can leave that as is. But this one, we want this to run on the owning client. So let's compile and save. And let me double check, make sure we don't need to do anything else in here. I think we're good. Let's close this out. Let's close out the lobby menu, and let's actually start working on our lobby player controller now. So double click and open that up, and let's maximize this. Open that up. Get over here. All right, so we're inside of the lobby player controller now, which is where we're going to spend the rest of this video. We're going to create some script in here. We're not going to finish the lobby player controller because we're going to come back to it a little bit later, but we'll get a good portion of it done, and then we'll pause, and then we'll start working on our lobby menu setup and come back to this later. So the first thing that we're going to do, let's get rid of these. We're going to use a custom event. Custom event is called initial setup. So initializing our setup for our player controller. One thing I did want to mention too before we continue here about player controllers. Player controllers exist both on the client and the server. There are two versions of them. One that exists on the server and the one that exists on each client. Player controllers on the client are not aware of other player controllers. So we're going to do some things to kind of help get the information from other player controllers and distribute that information inside of our lobby menu. So just wanted to mention that real quick. So for our initial setup custom event, we're going to make sure that this executes on the owning client. Running owning client. Let's make that reliable. Let's compile. And we don't need server menu. Just want to double check our, which was it, lobby menu. And did I make this reliable? Sure didn't. So let's make this reliable as well. So inside of our lobby menu, our update player window, make all of these reliable because these need to happen. Sorry about that. All right, so back in the lobby player controller now. First thing that we're going to do is run and see if a save game exists. So let's go ahead and create a function for this. Function going to be called save game check. We'll come back to this in a moment. Let's just drag it in now and call it at this point. And then what we'll do is we're going to call an event that executes on the server side player controller now. So we're going to create a custom event called, let's see, custom event, and we'll call it call update. And call update is going to be run on the server. So run on server, it's reliable. It's going to have some input. So let's add two inputs. First is going to be of the player info type. And we'll call it just player info. And the other one's going to be of the Boolean type, which is fine. And we're going to call this changed status. So did I toggle if I was ready or not? That's what this is going to be. Okay. We're then going to call that as part of our initial setup here. So now we can call the call update function. You can see it also says it's replicated to server if owning client. So let's connect that. Target is ourself. That's fine. Shoot, you know what? Let's delete that real quick. Need to compile. So it takes effect our name here. So let's try that now. Call update. I cannot type this morning. So call update, and now it says player info. That's what we want. So let's connect this up. Change status, we're going to leave that as false. But this player info here, we're going to promote this to a variable. So I'm going to right click on this, promote this to a variable called player settings. So. And player settings needs to be replicated. So let's go ahead and make sure that this is set to replicated. And we'll add that under the player info section. So under the player info section, like so. So this is the initial setup here. Just add a comment around this and say initial setup. Check for save game, game info. And tell server to update. So, okay. We'll come back to this in a moment. I'm going to pull this down just a little bit. Let's go ahead and set up our lobby menu now. So let's right-click, custom event. This custom event is going to be called setup lobby menu. It's going to be run on the owning client. It's going to be reliable, and it's going to have an input. And this input is going to be text. And this is actually just going to be the server name. So server name. And let's see, the other thing that we're going to do, let's right click and say show mouse cursor, because we'll be in a new map at this point, so we'll need to re-enable the mouse cursor. So set show mouse cursor, set that to true, connect this up. And then what we'll do is create widget. Widget we are creating is going to be lobby menu. So, And because we set that publicly exposed variable, when we create our lobby widget, we can pass through whatever the server name should be at the time of creation. So that's kind of why we had to do that first, so that we can hook this up here. Okay, then we'll promote this to a variable. So we'll just say promote to variable, and we'll call it the lobby menu WB reference. So I'll just call it lobby menu WB. That's fine. So, and we'll add that under widgets. We're only going to have one, but that's fine. And then we can drag off of this and say add to viewport. And then the other thing that we're going to do is, let's right click and say set input mode game and UI. So we have game and UI input, and we'll specify the widget that we're going to focus on. So let's connect this up. The widget we're going to focus on is going to be our lobby menu. So let's do that. Target is going to be self. So we can drag off this and say self. Like so. And that's all we need to do. Okay, so this is setting up and displaying our lobby menu, so let's add a comment around that. Set up and display the lobby menu. Okay. Now let's do our call update function. Let's get this out of the way and do this. Okay, so the player info, we're going to pass that through to player settings here. So we're going to take player settings, drop that on top, like so. And now what we can do is call that swap character function that we created inside of our game mode. So we're going to need to get our game mode first. So get game mode, and drag off this and cast to lobby game mode. And we can convert this to a pure cast. Just right click on the node, convert to pure cast, like so. And now we could say from this we can call swap character. This up. Player controller is going to be ourself, so we could drag off this and just say self. Now the character class, we need to specify what that is. That's going to come from our player settings information. So let's control drag in player settings, drag off of it and break it apart. So break player info, expand this and get the character, plug that in there, like so. Re-hide everything now, kind of. And then the change status, let's just plug this straight in like so. Once we've done this, what we'll do is then tell everybody to update. So we'll say everyone update from our game mode, like so. Okay, so let's add a comment around this. And this assigns the updated character selection when we provide that script, and tells everyone to update their lobby menus when we provide that too as well. But this is what this will handle. All right, let's go ahead and let's update the player list window when that's called. So for this, let's make sure that this is reliable. Yeah, it is. Let's create a custom event. This custom event is going to be called add player info. And this is going to be run on the client. It's going to be reliable. It's going to need an input. That input is going to be of the player info type. And this is going to be an array, actually. So it's going to be all of the player infos for each player that is connected. So we'll call this connected player info. Connected players info. Let's compile that. And we're going to promote that to a variable. So let's promote that to a variable. And we'll call this all connected players. And this is going to be replicated as well. We'll put it under player info is fine. So, okay. Then what we're going to do is let's get a reference to our lobby menu widget. Hold Control, drag that in. Drag off of this. and say is valid. First of all, make sure that it's valid. And let's plug this in like so. If it's not valid, we're not going to do anything. If it is valid, we're going to call that clear player list. So clear the player list. And then what we'll do is we'll take all of our connected players. We'll control drag that in. We'll run a for each loop. Is it F? Let's see. Yep. Hold F and left click. For each loop. Plug that in. Plug that in. So for each of our players that are connected, we're then going to add them to our player list window. And we can do that from our lobby menu widget blueprint. So if we copy that, let's just move it down here and say update player window. Again, this is one of the functions that we created at the beginning that we are now calling. And it's going to ask for the incoming player info, where we're going to do that for each of our connected players. So we're going to plug that in like so. And this executes on the owning client. So that is for updating the player list window, and we're going to call that when people join or change their characters, etc. So let's add a comment around this and just say update player list window when called. I think that's good enough of a comment. Okay. Let's see, how much more do we want to do? A little bit more. We're doing okay on time. We'll do a little bit more and then we'll break. So let's update the lobby settings now. So whenever the server changes the settings, we want to see that reflected on our client version. So let's go ahead and create a custom event. Custom event's going to be called update lobby settings. So it is going to be run on the client. It's going to be reliable, and it's going to have some inputs, 3 of them actually. The first is going to be a texture 2D, so texture 2D reference. Second one's going to be text. Third one's going to be text as well. They are all not going to be arrays, so let's make sure that those aren't arrays. First one here is going to be called map image. So our map that we selected, the image. The map name of our map. And let's say map time is going to be another setting that we can change. So let's compile this and save that. Okay, now we can take our lobby menu widget blueprint here, control drag that in. From it, we can say set map image. This up. You can kind of see where I'm going with this. Drag off this again, set map name, and set map time. Let's plug these in like so. Now we're going to pass these through to those variables. So, like so, and like so. So this will update the lobby settings on the client. So let's add a comment around this and just say update lobby information on the client. So the next thing that we'll do is when the server chooses to launch the game, we'll remove the lobby menu and create a loading screen and add that to the viewport as we transition into our gameplay map. So let's add a custom event. Show loading screen. And this is something that I'm just now thinking of as well. We did this inside the game instance. We could probably call it from the game instance, but in an effort not to break things, I'm going to do it the way I set up my example map or example project. So show loading screen. This is going to be run on the owning client. It's reliable. It's not going to have any inputs. All we're going to do is right click and say remove. Oops, not remove. We need to take our lobby menu here, control drag that in, drag off of this and say remove from parent so that we hide it. And at that point, we're going to create a widget. The widget that we are creating is loading screen. Owning player, self. And then the return value, we're not going to promote that to a variable. We'll just say add to viewport. Like so. So let's add a comment around this and say remove the lobby menu and display load screen. Okay. We'll do 2 more things and then we'll pause here. Let's see. The next thing we're going to do is the number of players that are connected, that display. Let's go ahead and handle that. So we'll right click and we'll say custom event. Custom event's going to be called update number of players. It's going to have 2 inputs on it. They're both going to be integers. The first is going to be current players. And the second is going to be max players. So, okay. First thing we'll do, we'll take our lobby menu widget here, copy that, paste it, and say is valid. Make sure it's valid before we run this. Connect this up. And then what we'll do is we'll drag off of this and say set players display, another variable that we created earlier on. And we're going to be setting that now. Now how we're going to actually get this value, let's take our current players and we'll say to text int. So we'll convert it to a text. We'll take our max players and do the same thing. Let's just copy this, paste it, plug that in. Now what we want to do is this is going to give us the current number of players, make it a text format, and our max players make that a text format. We want it to read a certain way. So there's a node we can use called format text. I don't know if any of you have used this. We'll say format text. And the format that we want to provide is we're going to use like a curly Q bracket here, and we'll say current players closed curly Q of curly Q max players in another bracket. When we hit enter, it's going to give us the 2 pins and it will spit it out in this format for us. So we'll say current players like so, max players like so, and it'll format that text for us. So that result is going to go in like that. So that's all we need to do for updating the display. So let's hit C and say update the display of connected players. Like so. And we'll do one more thing and then we'll pause here. So let's go ahead and do this and then we'll pause. Let's right click. This is going to be event end play. So an event in play. Event to notify Blueprints this actor is about to be deleted. So event in play. So whenever if the server leaves, disconnects, or a player is kicked, this will get fired. At that point, we're going to destroy the session. So destroy session. And this is another thing that we did inside of our game instance where we call this through a session caller. Maybe we'll try and see if we delete these down the road, what it will break. I'm sure it'll break something. So I'm going to do it in here for now, and then we'll come back and test it later maybe. But we're going to destroy the session because we need to destroy the session. Player controller is going to be self. Move this over a little bit. We're going to create a custom event here. Custom event. This custom event is going to be called kicked. So in the event that I am kicked by the server, we're also going to destroy the session. This is going to be run on the owning client. It's reliable. Doesn't need to input or anything. But before we destroy the session, we're going to say open level. Oops. Level we're going to be opening is the main menu, so you're going to be returned to the main menu at that point. Don't need to do any options or anything, and then we'll come up here to destroy session. So that is, let's add a comment around this and say called when the server disconnects or the player is kicked. All right, let's compile and save. And let's pause here, actually. We did quite a bit in this video. It's a little bit longer than I wanted. So we're going to pause here. We'll pick it back up in the next video where we start working on the lobby menu setup. So the design of our lobby menu. We'll do that in the next video. So thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you then.